Sweetie, I can almost smell the honeysuckle blooming by the old porch swing as I sit here with my notebook, and Lord, have mercy, my heart feels like it's about to spill out these memories I've tucked away for so long. I'm your grandmother, just an ordinary woman of 65 winters, sitting on this creaky rocker, the June sun filtering through the lace curtains, and I can't shake the memory that's been dancing in my mind all morning. It was the summer of '05, I reckon, when I first noticed something wasn't quite right. I remember reaching for my little amber pill bottle on the bedside table one damp morning, the one with the faded yellow label that told me I needed to take my heart medicine before breakfast. But the bottle was light, too light, and when I twisted the cap, I swear it was empty. I looked around the dim room, my heart fluttering like a frightened sparrow, and I thought, now where on earth did I put those pills? By then, I'd lived long enough to know my own habits. I never missed a dose. I looked over at the calendar on the wall, June 14th, clear as day, and I wondered how I could be so forgetful. Well, bless my heart, that's when the first seed of doubt nestled into my mind. At 20 seconds into this tale, if you're feeling a little tug of curiosity, why don't you go ahead and tap that little like button or leave a comment down below to let me know you're listening. No rush, sweetie, just whenever you feel moved. I pushed myself up from the rocker, my bones creaking in protest, and shuffled to the kitchen to rummage through my purse, thinking perhaps I'd stashed those pills in a different compartment. But they weren't there. I paused by the window, the screen shimmering in the sunlight, and a melody drifted in, my late husband whistling our favorite tune as he tended the roses. It anchored me to a time when life was simpler, when he'd tease me about my pill routine, and I'd tease him back about his morning coffee ritual. That melody brought back warmth, but also a pang of unease, because I realized something in our home had changed even if everything looked the same. I returned to the bedside table, eyes scanning every surface, the lamp with its frilly shade, the small stack of letters from my sister, the glass of water I'd set down the night before. But no pills. And that's when the question settled like dew on the morning grass. Could someone else have moved them? Now, you might be wondering why I'm dredging up these memories after all these years, and Lord, that's the very question that's been keeping me awake lately. You see, darling, I tucked that worry away, thinking I must have misplaced them, but deep down, I felt a whisper of something darker stirring. I felt betrayed by my own senses, wondering if age was finally catching up to me, stealing my dignity one missing pill at a time. Yet there was this stubborn ember of suspicion that wouldn't let me rest, an ember I'm fanning today, because it's time the whole world knows that sometimes the worst battles are fought in silence, right under our noses. So here we are, back on that humid June morning, the air heavy with anticipation, and I'm turning the pages of my life to share with you the story that's haunted my dreams for a decade. Keep listening, dear ones, because what started with a missing bottle led me down a path I never imagined, and I promise you, by the end of this journey, you'll see why this memory remains etched in my heart like the first note of a long-forgotten song. Sweetie, let me take you back to a time when the world felt as gentle as a summer breeze, when I was just a giggling girl with 2 plates swinging as I raced the sun across our little farmhouse yard. I was born in the spring of 1940, on a narrow country road where the sycamore trees whispered stories to the wind and our front porch rocked ever so slightly under the weight of Sunday afternoon gatherings. My mama, God rest her soul, would rise before dawn to stoke the wood stove and hum an old hymn while she kneaded dough for biscuits, and Daddy would head out to the barn to tend the Jersey cow with soft brown eyes he'd named Bess. I'd tiptoe down the creaky stairs, slip on my well-worn slippers, and stand behind Mama as she rolled that dough, believing at 6 years old that kindness was the light that guided every soul home. Back then, our world moved to the rhythm of rooster calls and church bells, and I thought life would always be so predictable. After breakfast, I'd follow my sister down the dirt lane to the one-room schoolhouse, its windows fogged with chalk dust and its blackboard etched with lessons about distant lands I could only dream of visiting. We'd recite multiplication tables and listen to Miss Harriet read tales of brave heroes, and I'd clutch a pencil in my small hand, imagining myself writing letters to folks I'd never met, telling them about our peach trees and the way fireflies danced at twilight. Well, bless my heart, I believed then that dreams were seeds you planted in your heart, and with enough faith, they'd bloom into something real. By 16, I was a young woman with aspirations of becoming a teacher, wearing my Sunday dress every day so that I'd be ready for any chance that came my way. I spent hot afternoons leaning against the fence, daydreaming of chalk dust swirling around me as I stood before a classroom full of eager faces. And on Sunday evenings, Daddy would drive us into town for the Methodist potluck, where neighbors traded stories and sweet iced tea, and I'd blush when Mr. Thompson from the feed store tipped his hat and asked me about my plans. I thought I had all the time in the world, time to teach, time to marry a good man, time to watch my little ones grow. I believed that people always came back, that family was the unbreakable thread weaving every story together. But in those days of gingham dresses and hand-cranked ice cream churns, I had no inkling that the same hands I trusted to pass me fresh-baked bread would one day rearrange my life in ways I couldn't imagine. My childhood bedroom was painted pale yellow, with lace curtains that fluttered like butterfly wings when the breeze drifted through the window. I kept a blue diary beneath my pillow, where I penned my dreams in pencil. I will teach children to read, I wrote one quiet evening, and I will always remember to say please and thank you. My mama taught me that empathy was the greatest gift. Lord, have mercy, she'd say. Everyone's carrying a burden you can't see, and I carried that lesson like a lantern in the dark, lighting the corners of my own heart with compassion. Evenings were spent out on the porch swing, with crickets chirping a lullaby and Daddy's soft whistle weaving through the night air. I felt safe then, nestled between the security of my parents' love and the promise of tomorrow's sunrise. Oh, how I longed for that sweet innocence again, where every worry could be soothed with a fresh glass of lemonade and a mother's embrace. That child, I was believed wholeheartedly that the world was fair, that love was enough to mend any wound, and that family ties were forged in trust and laughter. Little did I know, sweetie, that those tender beliefs would be tested in the years to come, and I'd lean back on these memories to remind myself who I was before life's shadows crept in. But for now, let me hold you in that warm summer glow of my beginning, when hope was as endless as the horizon, and the sweetest words I knew were thank you kindly and bless your heart. Sweetie, I still remember the way the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in that small exam room at Dr. Harper's clinic, the scent of antiseptic mingling with the faint trace of lavender soap, and Lord, have mercy. My heart was thundering in my chest before I even sat down on that stiff vinyl chair. I'd gone in for my routine checkup, just the usual blood pressure and a quick word with the nurse. Yet something in the air felt different that morning in late August, just as the cicadas were wrapping up their endless chorus outside the window. Nurse Martinez, bless her heart, was humming softly as she took my arm, but then she paused, frowned, and said, "Oh my, your pulse is off by nearly 2 hours from your last visit." My brow furrowed as I asked, off by 2 hours, because of course I'd taken my heart pills right on time every morning for the past 10 years, or so I believed. I tried to study my breathing, willing the memory to surface of that familiar routine, cup of chamomile tea, a small toast, and then the little amber bottle on the nightstand. But my mind felt foggy. Well, bless my heart, I muttered, awkwardly patting my cardigan pocket as if the pills might magically appear there. Dr. Harper knocked gently and entered, offering that kindly smile of his, the one that used to reassure my late husband whenever he felt a twinge in his chest. He studied the chart, then looked up at me with gentle curiosity in his eyes, as if he were about to share some tender family secret. "Mrs. Lawson," he said, leaning forward, "we've got to talk about these gaps in your medication schedule. My stomach lurched, and I felt an odd mixture of surprise and something darker, anticipation, perhaps, that this was more than just a simple scheduling error. I tucked my hand under my shawl, recalling how my daughter, dear Emily, had picked me up that morning, insisting we be on time. I remembered her smile in the car, so sweet and attentive, reminding me of the way she used to braid my hair when she was just a little girl. "Sweetie," I found myself whispering to the empty chair across from me, as though Emily herself were there to comfort me. "I don't understand." Dr. Harper's voice was soft as he explained that missing doses could lead to irregular heartbeats, dizziness, even fainting spells, and indeed, I'd nearly toppled onto the kitchen tile only that morning when I reached for the sugar jar and my legs went weak. Each word he spoke felt like a stone in my pocket, dragging me deeper into confusion. When the nurse excused herself to fetch another chart, I closed my eyes and let out a sigh that trembled with reluctance. In that pause, memories flashed: my father's stern look when I fractured my wrist as a child, his words of caution ringing in my ears, my mother's gentle hands pressing a cool cloth to my brow, my own reflections as a schoolgirl, dreaming of a life where I'd care for others with unshakable compassion. And there, among those recollections, lurked an unsettling question: had anyone else been touching my pills? When Nurse Martinez returned, she placed the new chart on the table and said, "Emily mentioned she'd been helping keep track of your medicines lately." I forced a polite nod, but my throat tightened. My first reaction was an internal jolt. I couldn't explain why my heart pounded faster, nor why a chill ran down my spine as I thought of my daughter's comforting smile. That single sentence opened a door I never wished to approach. How had I not seen the signs? Why had I trusted so completely? And why, after all these years, did my own daughter's assistance feel suddenly like a question I couldn't answer? Lord have mercy, it was in that buzzing exam room, under those unblinking lights, that the old certainties began to unravel, and I realized this visit would change everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and the frailty of a well-ordered life. "Sweetie, I'll be honest with you, life seemed to throw its first real curveball at me not long after that unnerving doctor's visit, and Lord have mercy, I wasn't prepared for the storm that followed. It began the morning I awoke to find another pill was missing, this time from my midday dose, and a letter from my daughter Emily, taped to the kitchen fridge, telling me she'd be taking me on a little trip to her friend's cabin up north for some fresh air and family time. I packed my suitcase in a daze, the jingle of my pill bottles muffled under folded sweaters, and climbed into her car without so much as a protest, convinced I was simply grateful for the attention. But when we arrived, the cabin's windows were shuttered, the lock rusty, and Emily insisted I stay put in the spare bedroom while she ran errands, "just to make sure you rest," she said, with that soft look that used to warm my heart. Instead, I felt my chest tighten in confusion. Days crawled past like molasses, the only visitors a kindly neighbor who dropped off groceries and asked how I was feeling, and an occasional mail carrier who waved through the window. Outside, the pines whispered secrets to the wind, but inside those walls I felt trapped, my routine stripped away, my independence slipping like water through my fingers. I wanted to call my son-in-law, my sister, anyone, but Emily had packed my phone in a drawer and taken the car keys. She said she'd be back soon, but soon turned into late afternoons, and late afternoons stretched into evenings. I remember lying on that narrow bed, the sheets scratchy against my skin, and my mind raced with questions I was too proud to voice. Was I losing my mind? Was I to blame for all this confusion? Shame washed over me in heavy waves, shame that I couldn't manage my own affairs, shame that I'd let my precious routines be dismantled without a fight. Outside the cabin, my late husband's absence felt more acute than ever. He'd always been my anchor, and now his memory only reminded me of how vulnerable I'd become. I yearned for his gentle whistle on the porch, his steadying hand when I felt uncertain. Instead, I was met by Emily's calm assurances that it's for my own good, which cut sharper than any blade. When I finally coaxed a neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell, to bring me a cup of tea, I poured my heart out over that chipped mug, trembling as I confessed my fear that something was terribly wrong. She patted my hand and whispered, "Sometimes the ones we love most don't know how much we need our dignity, dear," and that simple truth lodged itself in my chest like a pebble I couldn't swallow. In the days that followed, the external conflict grew. Emily's friends would peer in through the curtains, offering sympathetic smiles that felt laced with pity, and my own family back home called only sporadically, told Emily they were busy, and left me wondering if they believed Emily's version of events. Internally, I wrestled with guilt for betraying my daughter by doubting her motives, guilt for missing her kindness, and worst of all, guilt for the shame I felt at admitting I needed help. Fear settled in my bones like an unwanted guest, fear of being forgotten, of never returning to my cozy rocker on the porch, of losing the clear mind I'd worked hard to preserve. Pause, but in that tangled mess of emotions, a quiet resolve began to form. If I didn't speak up, no one else would hear my true voice. So I sat myself up one evening, wrapped in my shawl, and wrote a letter to my sister, words I could never quite say aloud, describing how isolated I felt, how frightened, and asking her to come. I slipped the note between the cushions of the sofa while Emily was out, my hand shaking, and not act simple and small, felt like the first flicker of light in a dark room. Even now, sweetie, when I look back on that time, I feel the weight of those days pressing on my chest, reminding me how easily life can shift under our feet when trust is misplaced. But I also see that moment of courage, the first spark of rebellion against the forces that sought to silence me, and I know that sometimes our greatest battles start in the quietest corners of our souls. Sweetie, I remember that night as if the whole world held its breath. Our family gathered around the dining table in Emily's dining room, the chandelier casting soft halos over the crystal glasses, and Lord, have mercy, my heart was pounding so loud I feared everyone could hear it. It was early November, and the air smelled of cinnamon and roast turkey, but beneath the cozy aroma lay a tension I couldn't place. We'd come together under the guise of a simple family dinner, Emily, her husband Mark, my granddaughter Lily, and me, but I felt a shift in the currents of conversation the moment I sat down. Emily poured my sweet iced tea with a tender smile that felt almost rehearsed. "Mom, you haven't touched the cranberry relish yet," she said, placing a small spoonful before me. I nodded, suppressed a sigh, and reached for the spoon, my eyes drifting to the little amber bottle nestled discreetly in her purse at her side. It was that same bottle, only half full, and in that instant, time stopped. I could see the room ripple around me. The laughter of Lily at something Mark said faded into a distant echo, and all I could hear was the dull thud of my own pulse. "Emily," I said, my voice trembling despite my best attempt at calm, "you're carrying my pills with you tonight." Her hand flew to her chest as if stung. "Oh, Mama, I just wanted to," she began, but her words caught in her throat. I looked around at the faces, Mark's concerned frown, Lily's wide eyes, the table set so beautifully that it almost mocked me. "You wanted to what, sweetie?" I asked softly, leaning forward so that the crystals on the table caught the light like tiny stars around us. My hands felt ice cold despite the warmth of the room. Emily swallowed hard and stared at her hands. I thought it would help if I managed your doses. You know, so you didn't miss them." My breath caught. In that moment of crisis, the betrayal cut deeper than any blade. I realized I had lost not just my routine, but my autonomy, piece by piece over months and years, all under the guise of help. My throat tightened, tears welling as I remembered every missing pill, every doctor's frown, every moment I doubted my own mind and blamed myself. I had lost my trust in my own senses and in my daughter. You thought you were doing right by me, I whispered, voice cracking, but you never asked if I wanted you to. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the chandelier. Lily reached out to grasp my hand, her small fingers warm and reassuring, and I saw in her eyes the reflection of my younger self, trusting, hopeful. I took a shuddering breath and forced myself to speak again, louder, firmer. This isn't kindness, Emily. It's control. I could feel the muscles in my shoulders uncoil as I said the words, and with them came a fierce surge of clarity. I was done being a passive participant in my own life. Tears rolled freely now, but they were cleansing, too, washing away months of doubt and shame. The moment felt both like an ending and a beginning, an emotional apex where the scales fell from my eyes, and I reclaimed the dignity that had been slipping through my fingers. Emily's face paled. Mark stood, unsure whether to comfort me or defend her. I looked around the table, at the remnants of that perfect meal, at my family caught in the crossfire, and I felt my lifelong belief in the power of kindness shift into something stronger, the power of honesty. I love you, sweetie, I said, voice steady despite the tears, but I need you to love me enough to treat me as I am, your mother, not a project. In that charged silence, I could almost feel the old bonds breaking and new ones forming, bonds founded on respect rather than assumption. And as the chandelier's glow settled back into a gentle warmth, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again, because in that moment of raw confrontation, I found the strength to stand up for myself, and to show my family that sometimes the deepest love demands the hardest truths. Sweetie, after that stormy night at the dinner table, I felt as though the world around me had gone silent, like someone flipped a switch, and the laughter, the clinking of dishes, even the hum of the refrigerator all faded away, leaving nothing but a hollow echo in my chest. I spent the next few days in a kind of quiet trance, shuffling through the house in my slippers, sliding onto the porch swing as if it might carry me somewhere new, and sighing whenever the wind rustled the wind chimes Daddy made so long ago. I couldn't eat much. Even my favorite oatmeal tasted like cardboard. I'd wake up before dawn, heart hollow, remembering the confrontation, but feeling too exhausted to face another battle. The walls felt too small, the air too still, and I missed the simple routine of taking my pills at the exact same time, even as I hated what they had come to symbolize. I tried to find meaning in the solitude, to stitch myself back together with bits of the old me, reading the Bible passages Mama loved, thumbed and worn, tending my rose bushes in the backyard, humming that old hymn Daddy used to whistle. But each petal I pruned, each verse I repeated, felt tinged with sorrow, as if the earth itself was whispering that nothing would ever smell as sweet as it once did. I'd sit by the window for hours, watching the street below, wondering if the neighbors had noticed the change in me, if they wondered why I no longer chuckled at their morning waves or set a plate of cookies on the fence for the mailman. My faith in people, in the kindness I once believed was universal, wavered like a candle in the breeze. Lord, have mercy, I'd whisper into the twilight. How do I trust again when the ones I loved most turned my world upside down? At times, the emptiness felt almost unbearable, as if the very core of me had been hollowed out. My confidence slipped through my fingers like sand. I found myself hesitating before answering the phone, worried it might be Emily checking in, offering her calm assurances that felt like chains. I questioned my own judgment. How had I not seen the warnings? How had I allowed someone else to rearrange the rhythm of my days without even asking? But in the quiet of that fragile pause, something unexpected began to stir, a soft, persistent whisper that reminded me who I was long before this all began. I remembered the little girl who believed dreams were seeds that grew into beautiful things, the young woman who trusted that kindness could light the dark corners of the world. And slowly, so slowly, like dawn breaking over the horizon, I decided to cultivate a new kind of hope, one born not from blind trust, but from self-reliance and gentle wisdom. I started by reclaiming small territories of my life. I rearranged my bedroom so that my nightstand held only the objects I chose: a framed photo of Mama in her polka dot dress, Daddy's old pocket watch, and yes, my own little amber pill bottle full, locked, and waiting for me to open it on my own terms. I set a daily routine that honored my needs: morning tea in the garden, a walk down the lane to greet the farm cats, a half hour of reading or letter writing each afternoon. At first, it felt awkward, as if I was learning to walk again, but with each small victory, my heart grew steadier. I also reached out to friends I'd neglected: Mrs. Caldwell, who still saved a slice of her blueberry pie for me; my church group, who insisted on delivering casseroles and prayer cards; even the pharmacist who once smirked at my confusion, now offering a kind word and a listening ear. These connections reminded me that not everyone viewed me as fragile or forgetful. Some still saw me as the wise woman who served punch at the ladies' tea and taught Sunday school with spark in her eye. By the time the first frost touched the roses, I felt a quiet strength settle into my bones. My faith in life, not in the naive sense that everything is always gentle, but in the resilience of the human spirit, returned. I learned that healing doesn't require grand gestures. It begins in the silence after the storm, in the decision to plant new seeds of hope in the soil of our hearts. Sweetie, life after that crisis was neither simple nor sweet, but it was honest. I found that loss can carve out space for something new to grow, and that in the echoing hush of solitude, we can sometimes hear our truest selves speak the loudest. And though I'll never be exactly who I was before, I've come to cherish this version of me, stronger, wiser, and rooted in a deeper understanding of what it means to live fully, even after everything changes. Sweetie, one crisp morning as I sat on my porch swing, wrapped in my favorite shawl and listening to the robins sing, something unexpected stirred in my heart, like the first hint of spring after the long, cold winter. I'd been tending my rose bushes, pruning away the dead branches, when I noticed a small bud peeking through the thorns, determined to open despite everything. And Lord, have mercy, that tiny bud felt like a sign to me: if it could find the strength to bloom, so could I. I paused, set aside my pruning shears, and let out a soft sigh, realizing that, even in the aftermath of hurt, life finds a way to press forward. Not long after, my neighbor Mrs. Thompson stopped by with a basket of fresh eggs from her hens. She asked, in that warm tone she always uses, "How are you holding up, dear?" And I surprised myself by answering honestly, "I'm finding moments of peace, thanks to small surprises like this bud here in my garden." She smiled and invited me to join the community knitting circle at the senior center that afternoon, saying they could use someone with a steady hand and a kind heart. At first, I hesitated, thoughts flickering like moths around my doubts. What if I didn't fit in? What if I failed again? But then I thought of that bud and felt a gentle nudge inside, urging me to take a tiny step beyond my comfort zone. So I wrapped myself in my best cardigan, smoothed my hair, and walked down the lane to the center, my cane tapping a soft rhythm on the sidewalk. The room was filled with ladies and gentlemen chatting over steaming mugs of tea, yarn spilling onto tables like colorful rivers. When I introduced myself, they greeted me with open arms, offering me a skein of lavender wool to start a new shawl. As I looped the first stitch, I felt warmth spread through my chest, not just from the tea, but from the simple joy of creating something beautiful, stitch by stitch. That afternoon, I helped an elderly veteran untangle a knot in his yarn and offered gentle reassurance, and in his grateful smile I saw a reflection of my younger self, eager to teach and to serve. My heart swelled with purpose I hadn't felt in months, and for the first time since that fateful dinner, I believed that my life could have meaning beyond the walls of that cabin or the confines of my own doubts. Over the next few days, I returned to the knitting circle, each visit like a small sunrise breaking over the horizon of my spirit. I took to volunteering at the local food pantry, to lifting cans, filling bags, and sharing quiet words of comfort with those in need. In helping others, I discovered a new reason to rise in the morning, a new sense of connection that replaced the isolation I'd felt. And sweetie, every time I handed someone a bag of groceries or finished a row of knitting, I felt that bud in my garden opening just a little more. One afternoon, as I sat back on my porch, I looked across to the neighbor's house where children played hopscotch and chalk-drawn squares. I found myself humming that old hymn Mama used to sing, marveling at how life's simplest rhythms can bring us back to ourselves. I realized that this new impulse, this careful optimism, was built on the recognition that hope doesn't always arrive with a trumpet fanfare. Sometimes it slips in quietly, through an invitation, a shared cup of tea, or the determination of a single rosebud. Now, when I tend those roses, I no longer see only thorns and faded petals. I see potential and promise, and I know that my days still hold room for growth. My faith in people has softened into something wiser. I accept that betrayal can wound deeply, but kindness can heal, too, and that each of us deserves a second chance to learn, to offer grace, and to bloom again. So, dear ones, if you're listening and feeling the weight of life's storms, remember that even a tiny bud can remind us of our own resilience. Take that first small step, say yes to a neighbor's invitation, reach out to someone in need, or simply plant a seed in your garden. You might be surprised to find that the impulse to hope is already stirring within you, ready to burst into bloom when you give it room to grow. Sweetie, I'll never forget the moment I stood in the soft glow of the hallway lamp, my hand hovering over that little amber pill bottle one last time, and Lord, have mercy, my chest felt as heavy as a sack of stones, and yet lighter than it had in years. I realized then that every missing tablet, every secret dose my daughter hoarded for her own comfort, had robbed me not only of my health but of my very sense of self. I closed my eyes, remembering the girl I once was, carefree, full of dreams, before life and loss and betrayal had edged their way into my daily rhythm. In that hush, I made a solemn promise to the quiet woman within me who still believed in second chances. I would choose to live again on my own terms. With deliberate calm, I unscrewed the cap and tipped the pills out into the palm of my hand. They gleamed like tiny, hollow promises that had never been honored. I gathered them in my other hand, walked to the little ceramic dish on the foyer table where I kept my grandmother's pearls, and let the pills tumble over the smooth porcelain, scattering like broken echoes of a past I refused to carry any longer. I felt tears slip down my cheeks as I reached for a box of matches, a symbolic gesture, yes, but one I needed with every fiber of my being. When I struck the match, the flame quivered, mirroring the tremble in my own heart, and I touched it gently to a scrap of paper on which I'd scribbled every question I'd kept bottled up. Why did you think you could decide for me? Who gave you the right to rewrite my story? The paper curled into ash in seconds, and as I blew out the tiny blaze, I felt the first true exhalation of freedom I'd felt in a decade. I didn't shout, I didn't wail. I simply stood there as the last tendrils of smoke drifted toward the ceiling, and I whispered, I choose to live on without shame, without regret, just forward. From that night on, I arranged my life around my own needs again. I set the pearly box of pills back in my locked drawer with a fresh prescription and my own clock beside it, ticking off the minutes of my new beginning. I made plans to move back into my own home, where the walls remembered my laughter, and I called my sister to tell her I was coming back, this time to stay. When I hung up the phone, the weight in my chest had lifted enough that I could draw a steady breath, and I felt as though I were stepping into the sunlight after a long, unending night. I knew the past could never be unspooled, and I carried the scars as gentle reminders of my strength. But in that decisive moment, when I let go of those pills, those memories of control, I discovered the truest gift of all, the power to choose who I would become next. And, sweetie, I hope you know that no matter how heavy your burdens may feel, You too can set down what no longer serves you and say, just as I did, I will live on in hope, in joy, in love. No more looking back. Sweetie, as I sit here now in the soft glow of the evening lamp, rocking gently and watching the shadows dance on the walls, I find myself reflecting on the journey I've walked, from the tremor of first doubt to the fierce reclaiming of my own life, and Lord, have mercy. What a path it's been. Back then, I believed that kindness meant never stirring the waters, that love meant protecting one another even from the hard truths. But I've learned that true kindness sometimes demands the courage to speak up, and genuine love requires the freedom to be one's own person. I used to think that family ties were unbreakable cords, that our children would always know best, but life taught me otherwise. That trust misplaced can unravel our confidence, and control disguised as care can suffocate the spirit. Now, I understand that boundaries aren't walls of division but bridges of respect, built when we honor the autonomy of those we cherish. I remember the girl who saw every dawn as a fresh promise, who believed that dreams could bloom endlessly, and I see in that young me the same spark that burned through my darkest days, proof that our inner light, once discovered, can never truly be extinguished. I once blamed myself for missing pills and for losing my sense of time, but I've come to recognize that vulnerability is not a flaw, but an invitation to ask for help, to surround ourselves with voices that uplift rather than control. My faith in people shifted from naive optimism to a tempered hope. I still believe in the goodness of hearts, but I know goodness requires an active choice, and that sometimes the bravest act of love is to let someone grow on their own. Sweetie, if there's one truth I carry now, it's this: waiting for permission to live fully is a gift we cannot afford to withhold from ourselves. We owe it to our own stories to decide when enough is enough, to embrace the messy, beautiful work of self-discovery, and to forgive ourselves for the times we hesitated. Perhaps you, too, have felt the soft tremor of doubt, the ache of a routine that no longer resonates, or the weight of expectations that dim your own flame. Maybe it's time to set down what's holding you back, be it regret, fear, or someone else's vision of who you should be, and step into the brightness of your own intention. I learned that healing doesn't demand grand gestures. It grows in the quiet moments when we whisper to our own hearts, I deserve respect, I deserve joy, I deserve to chart my own course. And in that gentle affirmation, life opens its arms again, offering us new reasons to hope. So, dear ones, take this with you. Your story matters. Your voice matters. You have the right to live it honestly, with tenderness for others and unwavering love for yourself. When you honor that truth, you give permission to everyone around you to do the same, and the world becomes just a little bit brighter for it. Sweetie, as we come to the close of this journey together, I want you to feel the warmth of this porch swing settle into your heart, and know that the story we've shared is not just a dusty memory from years gone by, but a living testament to the choices we make every single day. I've walked you through moments of doubt and heartbreak, through the thorns of betrayal and the tender shoots of hope, and now I sit here with the evening light soft on my face, imagining you by my side, listening to the cicadas' call and the gentle creak of that old swing beneath us. Well, bless my heart, I hope you feel how every one of these moments, every pill counted and misplaced, every whispered prayer and tearful confession, has shaped who I am today. A woman who holds her own story with pride, who understands that love sometimes falters, but that it can be reborn in truth and respect. As you watch these last few seconds, I want you to ask yourself, what seeds are you planting in your own life? Are you nurturing the gardens of kindness and honesty, or are you allowing old hurts to crowd out the new blooms of possibility? This tale may have begun in the shadow of a missing pill bottle, but it has grown into a celebration of finding one's voice, of laying down burdens that were never ours to carry, and of reaching across the table, whether it's with a daughter, a friend, or even ourselves, and saying, I choose authenticity. I choose freedom. Now, I'd love to leave you with a question that stayed with me long after that decisive night. Do you believe that true love should always find its way back? Think on that, sweetie, and let it nestle into your own reflections. Because while this chapter of my life is written, the next pages are still blank, and they belong to me, and they belong to you. Sometimes, when the stars are bright and the wind whispers through the pines, I like to believe he's watching over me still, remembering the promise I made to my younger self, to honor love with both courage and compassion. And sometimes I feel as if he still remembers.